The connection between oil and water has already been described, and I'm now very happy to introduce you to Glen Tarman, who is a founding member of Liberate Tate. For those of you who do not know Liberate Tate, it's an artists group that did numerous activities, performances, and launched a campaign to get rid of the BP sponsorship of the Tate galleries in the UK, and it was successful. And I think in March 2016, Tate did not renew this contract. Glen heads a global advocacy for one of the world's leading humanitarian and development NGOs, and he chairs an environmental charity campaigning globally to reduce the blue water and carbon footprints of human activity.
Thanks very much, Oliver. Just to ask you one question first. How many of you have been to the Tate in London? Just raise your hands. So that's more than half of you, yeah? So you're familiar with the building and the institution. I went to an event in January 2010, much like this. It was a symposium on art and activism. As Oliver said, I'm a professional activist. I work now for CARE, the organisation that sent care packages into Europe after the World War II, and now works with climate-affected people and people under humanitarian stress or living in extreme poverty. That's what I do, but I've always tried in my activism and the work I've done with NGOs to make sure we've had real creative approach and used fresh and dynamic approaches. And so I was interested as an activist to go to a couple of workshops on art and activism. And it was a really interesting first session on the Saturday. And before the second Saturday, it was in two parts, Tate intervened. And Tate gave a message to the organisers from the education department and the curators and the security staff that Tate could not host any interventions about itself and its sponsors coming out of this art and activism workshop. So we hadn't planned to do anything at all, but we wondered, what was it that was of such a concern to Tate that they would be concerned to stop such an activity? And of course, we looked at the wall of sponsors, as you do in any gallery. They're all listed on the wall. And there was some awful companies, including BP. And so we wanted to refuse what we saw as an imposition of an institution that should champion free expression, but was linked to certain companies, and it had entered into trying to censor us in our action, and we felt that we needed to do something about it. So very modestly, this is the top of the Tate Modern. With the time and materials we had, like lots of workshops, we fashioned with paper just the message on oil and put it out as a very modest refusal of that act. We as participants, though, had been galvanized to think that we should work together to get the oil company relationship with Tate to be ended. And so we began meeting and deciding what we would do. And there'd been a long tradition to protest some of the sponsorship of art by oil companies. The BP Portrait Award is the National Portrait Gallery's annual award, and oftentimes people had protested, green campaigners had protested outside with banners in a traditional protest as the media went in, as the award ceremonies happened. And we felt that this was not going to be an adequate enough response. And in any case, people like we were already artists, we wanted to make art. And we thought art making would be the most adequate response. So this was January 2010. What happened next? Well, in April, something big happened. And as the images you have behind you on your left from the current exhibition here demonstrate this was a global event. And what did Tate do? Well, Tate Modern had been around for 10 years, transformed the art landscape, popularised contemporary and modern art like no other institution in London. It chose to celebrate 10 years. So we felt that any celebratory event in a Tate institution, when its sponsor was creating such destruction around the world, was wrong. And we did a work called Dead in the Water, which we went into the gallery with large helium balloons, strapped some dead fish to them and some feathered birds, and let those helium balloons go up into the rafters. This is the roof of the Tate Modern building, and for a whole afternoon it had these big black globules in a huge space, and that evening they had to get riflemen in to shoot them down. The spill carried on. The oil, as you can see from these images, affecting the wildlife and much, much more. What was Tate's response? Tate every year has a summer party. It brings together the great and the good of the art world, other sponsors, other corporate partners, politicians, celebrities. And it just so happened that in June 2010, Tate had decided to celebrate 20 years of its partnership with BP. It did not think that that would be a bad idea. And this, to my mind, begins to tell you the kind of mentality of institutions that have been captured and hijacked by destructive forces. The internal mentality was to just go on. We must celebrate this relationship we had. And in fact, Nick Sirota, who ends his helm at the Tate today, said, "You do not depart from your friends when there's a small matter like this." So you saw in his remarks a defense of the indefensible in order to retain that relationship. So we went to that party, my friends and I, with big vats of an oil-like substance. And before the great and good came in, we spilt that. And this is a work called License to Spill. And different allies had given us tickets, and we went inside, and two female members of the group wore very large dresses that evening, and underneath which they had some bondage gear and some very heavy sacks of that black substance. And if you look at the film of this online, they slashed the skirts in the middle of the proceedings, and there's an oil spill across the whole of the gallery. So anybody there that night, literally we made them walk through this. And as you can imagine, this kind of act created quite a lot of a media storm, and it was our kind of, we have this English expression, to make a big splash, and this was our big splash in every way, and we kind of arrived. Now, I'm going to see if I can do my best in a moment, but not just yet. You won't be able to see all of this, and different people have different views about the relationship of oil companies and art. And at this time, the debate began. Well, surely if we've taken money from oil companies and we use it for art, this is a good thing, huh? What does it matter? And this began the public debate. And we were very much influenced by a group called Platform, who'd worked across art and the relationship with the oil company. And they produced this called The Carbon Web. I won't go into it so much, but just to say, obviously to extract oil from people whose land you don't own, or from the environment that wreaks havoc, requires a massive system of the banking and finance, the ancillary industries, the legal backing, the governments that you need on side or to bribe. It needs massive external affairs departments and relationships of NGOs that will talk to you, or other NGOs like Greenpeace that will oppose you. And within this cluster of external affairs, what had never been made that visible was the fact that oil and culture is there. That the sponsorship by oil companies into the cultural space wasn't just a modest act of corporate social responsibility. It was an explicit, purposeful act on their part to create what they call a social license to operate. So their strategy was to make sure that they used art, culture, also sport, to embed themselves in society in ways that would give them this license to operate. And so our work was really about destroying a small part of the carbon web in which they were using culture, if you like, as a wellhead in order to extract for them a social license to operate. Of course, the relationship continued and our interventions and the art that we made changed. This was a gallery in Tate Britain on the anniversary of Deepwater Horizon. It's a durational work. A member of Liberate Tate moved into the gallery with a few of us, undressed, lay on the floor in a gallery full of sculptures, an exhibition called Human Form, and we piled oil on top of that body. And what used to happen was Tate would start closing off the scene and getting the public out from acts like this. And we felt that this was quite nice because it made it even more special, that there was a cordon and people would come up and have a look. But for us as well, it was the beginning of experimentation in terms of the circulation of the image. So if you are there, it's a site-specific work, but it's also going to resonate throughout the gallery. The oil-like substance is actually charcoal in vegetable oil with a few other things. The cans that we poured on had been smuggled in by staff that were sympathetic to us, and the materials cost about $100. The next day, front page of the Financial Times. And this is important for us, not just because that's $100 gets you a lot of exposure. This is the very audience that BP is trying to influence, the opinion formers. It doesn't give a shit whether people go into the galleries and buy its petrol or not. That's not what's happening. Although a lot of defenders would say, I don't think people see BP sponsorship and go out and buy BP petrol. No, they don't. They're interested in elite opinion. So Tate was becoming vulnerable, BP was becoming more vulnerable, but we needed to do something extraordinary and raise the ante. So I'm going to just show you a short clip, if I can master this technology. This is a documentary. We oftentimes, could you open that one for me? This clip here. We often do work that's slow. Okay. The clip I'm going to show is called The Gift, and we know that a lot of artworks get stolen around the world. This is a reversed art heist. This is the biggest object that's ever been smuggled into an art gallery anywhere. And the film I'm showing, hopefully,
how much does it weigh?
1,300 kilos.
It's not progressing.
Right up, right up, and keep twisting so we go to the far corner over there. You're clear? Okay, and now forward.
I don't think you've got enough space to go through that door.
Sorry guys. Sorry guys, it's going to be a health and safety risk.
Push!
Okay, stand pause.
Do me a favour, can you go to the other side? There's more space, and this will help and safety.
It really needs to go here.
Please,
No,
go
honestly,
here.
it's too serious an issue for it to go outside. This conversation needs to take place in the gallery.
Okay, push!
Can we have more people in?
More people pushing!
It's an artistic performance. It's actually very carefully health and safety conscious. The safest thing you can do is let it happen, okay? It's an artistic performance.
Okay,
we
you know
are
what?
very careful to health and safety.
When I lie down on the floor, if you roll over me, that's your business. That's simple. You roll over me, that's simple, that's it. Roll over me and it's not going to happen then. That's it. Roll over me then. Roll over me then. Roll over me.
It's something that it is happening. It is happening.
Right, so get on this side of it.
Yeah.
And lean into it. There you go. Okay, nice and steady now, people. We have anyone who's interested in helping out, just helping keep people away on this side for me, please.
Your group is just some assistance in making sure that members of the public are
Yes,
clear
that's,
as well.
I've got some people creating a cordon around here now. Yeah, if everyone can create a cordon around for us.
This way. One foot this way.
Roughly what are your intentions over the next few hours?
So it'll probably take us another 30 minutes or so to lower this safely onto the ground.
Right.
And then what we plan to do is actually give it to the Tate as a gift,
Right.
which under the Museum and Galleries Act, we're legally allowed to give them a gift and for them to consider it to become a work of their permanent collection. So we've just come to deliver them this gift.
Just out of interest, what is it?
It's a wind turbine.
It is a wind turbine.
Yeah. Just need to go really slowly, and when we've got an inch gap, then stop again and we'll line the back up.
It's in.
Three, two, one, lower. Thank you, everybody. That's done.
Yep.
The Tate itself used to be a power station. It started off burning coal and then it moved on to oil. And so bringing the kind of a symbol of the future that we want to see, a renewable energy powered future, just seems really, really appropriate for the space.
We're leaving it in the turbine hall because we want to see a cultural shift away from oil, and Tate dropping BP as a sponsor is a really big part of that, because as long as Tate is tied to BP, that continues to say that what BP does around the world and the people that it harms and the lives that it's taken is okay. And actually, BP should be removed from our culture, and it should be removed from our cultural institutions.
So this was the gift. And as I hope you heard, that it was actually a work that we gifted to Britain. We used the legislation by which rich people give art to the nation to give this work to the British collection of art. And when you do that, when a rich person does that, the board of the institution, if it's a public art museum as Tate is, it's the board that need to make that decision. So we, by doing this and using that provision of the Act, made sure that the board had to consider this matter, and they knew full well what it was about. The board of Tate is chaired by Lord John Brown. John Brown was the CEO of BP. Across Europe and around the world, our art institutions are not just sponsoring, they've actually got these people on the boards. So Tate's governing body is led by a BP CEO. Now, if he were to accept that work, which we didn't think that they would, he would of course be accepting that his tenure at BP was something to do with bringing harm in the world. And that's what happened. So I'm going to try and find my way back into my presentation. Could you actually do that? And I just want to show you a couple of other works, a short clip, and then a little bit about how it's ended to the PowerPoint. We'll go to the PowerPoint, back to the PowerPoint. If you minimize that, I guess. And back to this one. Yeah, hopefully it's in the same place. So all the time for our process, we are trying to, my plan's ahead. We're trying to create works that are interventions. They're not representations. Oops, let's try again. We are trying to intervene, not just to undertake symbolic actions. Our work has different registers, and we did a few other works. In 2003, we did a work called Parts Per Million. A number of us went into the galleries. You'll notice that we used veils. One of the reasons we used veils is in the early days, a lot of artists were part of this. They've got their individual practice and so on, and the veils were ways for them to be anonymous and for it not to be about them and who we are. But that's why we took on a collective identity. And even for somebody like myself, there was a change of government in 2010. It was handy for me to wear a veil because the next day I would be in a lobby meeting with a government minister. And probably not good that they thought of that. This is Tate Britain. This gallery, Tate Britain, has been up until, well, this year it's going to change, in chronological order. And each gallery is a decade. And this is the 1840s gallery. And this gallery and this time is when humankind begin to impact the environment. Industrialization begins. So whilst a lot of the art on the wall is very much about nature, whilst it's being created, the parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere are increasing. And our work, Parts Per Million, moves through the gallery counting the parts per million. So we begin in this gallery, and we never ask permission to go in. There's an oil company already there. You know, bets are off. So this work, Parts Per Million, was counting the parts per million. And as we go through into the 20th century, the parts go up above 350 parts per million, the perceived safe measure. And we end in the modern day gallery, and we're all calling out 400. We've counted to 400, and that's where it is. And as you probably know today, we are well beyond that. When we did this work, Tate had not only renewed the contract with BP, it had named the entire British collection of art. Our art, the public-owned art, the BP Walk Through British Art. Unbelievable that they would actually do that. Literally, an oil company's walking through our actual collection, and you have to walk through it. There's flags outside, there's logos. Tate's brilliant at new media, so the BP logo circulates around the world. So this was one of our works that we did, always trying to look at this question of what's going on. So the contract's been renewed. We know we need to kind of raise the ante again. The old company has occupied the gallery. We are going to occupy the gallery. And we're going to do a work called Timepiece, and this is another clip. Perhaps you could help me get that clip out again while I explain it. As you know, you've been either to Tate Britain or Tate Modern. Tate's on the River Thames. And we did a durational piece that we wanted to begin at high tide and play through to the next high tide. So on the Saturday, as you'll see in a second, I'm going to fast forward this. We did this work called Timepiece, and if I can get the cursor. Okay. I'm going to try and bring it forward a little bit. And do we have sound? Maybe there's no sound yet in the clip. Oh, that's unfortunate. There should be sound on this clip. So, in any way, the sound's relatively quiet. We've gone into Tate Modern. We've gone in with texts that inspire us about art, about climate change, about philosophy, and we are writing texts on the wall, on the floor, in charcoal. And we've been doing that all afternoon, and we're going into the evening, and the security are getting nervous. The gallery closes at 10 o'clock. It's quite a slow piece. We're wearing the veils again. And these books are just there for anybody to pick up. They're in a row, and the public are just coming around and being part of this work. And the sun's beginning to go down. And Tate are beginning to get a bit nervous, and rightly so. We needed to escalate things. And closing time comes. The cops have been called. The public are leaving. We're not going anywhere. As artists, we get to these points in time, and like activists, we know who's prepared to be arrested. We know if Tate decide that they want the police to bring us in. But what they didn't count on is that we brought our own food. You can get these great things, you unplug them and it heats up a nice curry. I think you saw here that we'd made our own toilet. And so they decide that it's probably better if they just let us go all night. So I'm actually outside at this point thinking everybody's going to be busted and I'm in charge of security. The night is the work continuing. Some people sleeping, some people getting up. What we always wanted to do with this work is to be part of it, is to be part of something really special. We have open invitations for people to be involved. Obviously, for security reasons, we can't let everybody be part of certain parts of it. I turn up in the morning to meet my friends. In the morning, Tate have not opened it up again. They've closed this space. You remember the body on the floor and they cordoned it. This is part of the language we're experimenting with them about what we're doing. We've released the reading list on the web. People have been using social media to send out clips of the text and so on. And then we leave. And you're not going to hear this. They always clean up. We get on well with the cleaners. We try to give them little gifts to help them out, but they have to clear up after us. We have strong relationships, and we built them with the trade unions. And over the time of these works, the staff are getting more and more pissed off. They're objecting to their employers, as we are saying the public shouldn't be made complicit in the acts of BP, simply go to see the art that we already own. So that work was called Timepiece, one of our quieter registers. So I'm just going to show you how the story ends, if I can find my way back into my presentation. I've just got a couple more slides. There's a happy ending here, so sorry, I need your help again to get back in. So all the time we're producing this work and we're trying to damage the investment that BP have made, and we know they're getting more and more pissed off. So I just want to still struggling again now too. So Timepiece happens. I'm just going to show you one more piece, which I hope you find interesting. We've revisited the 2040 gallery, and this is the most beautiful tattoo parlour in the world. We've taken in the entire equipment to give tattoos, and you'll see on the left, on the top, we are tattooing people with the parts per million in the atmosphere the year they were born. So I haven't got what we called a birthmark. This was called birthmark. If I had one, it would have 320 because I'm old enough to have grown, to be born in the time when the climate levels were safe. A lot of people were being tattooed with figures above 350. And this is open source. We've put the numbers and the kit, everything out online, and people are creating birthmarks around the world. Hundreds and hundreds of people have got this. Again, they closed us off, but we tattoo people all day. And then in March 2016, BP had finally had enough. They were paying for bad publicity when they wanted good, and a journalist broke the story that they weren't going to renew the contract. So we went down one last time, and by this time, we know the building pretty well, and we know how to have fun there. And this is the top again of the Tate Turbine Hall. These are 3 members of Liberate Tate. That is 35 meters high. We have good climbers in our group, and they are letting out some black confetti because we're having a party down the bottom because we've won. A lot of artists are scared about trying to create real change. They're scared about being associated with that for various reasons. But we always wanted to show you can hopefully create good work and be part of making change happen. A few months before, we'd gone to the Louvre, and we launched the international movement at this venue, which is sponsored by an Italian oil company and Total. This isn't a problem just, as I mentioned before, about London. So this was inside, and this was pretty scary because it was just after the attacks, and there were soldiers all over the place. It took about 2 hours to get this together when soldiers were looking the wrong way, the other way. As Liberate Tate, we'd always wanted to inspire people, but it was amazingly gratifying when people started from what we were doing, different activities. So on the left, you've got BP or Not BP. It's a UK group that works with the Royal Shakespeare Company, sponsored by BP, and British Museum. On the bottom, you've got the Natural History Museum in the States, who the Koch brothers and a load of climate denialists have captured a lot of the natural history museums, and therefore the programs there, and they've been instrumental in getting scientists to be part of making sure that science museums and natural history museums aren't associated with oil companies. On the right, you've got Liberate the Louvre, a group using some of the visual language that we use, but recombining it because, as I've just mentioned, the Louvre is sponsored by oil companies. And on the top right, you've got Fossil Free Culture Netherlands, who 2 weeks ago entered the Van Gogh Museum, which is sponsored by Shell, and drank from shells a black oil-like substance that spilled in front of them. They ended up in jail. They became the Van Gogh 8, and they were held for 3 days before they were finally released. And in that period, the gallery came out and said, we admire our relationship with Shell, and did the usual apologist rubbish. But these are very determined women, and they'll be back. And Shell, at some point, will be out of the Van Gogh Museum. I didn't have too much time to do too much research about this wonderful city that I'd never been to before. But I did happen to notice that this museum is sponsored by this oil company. And this Vienna Biennale was also sponsored by the same company. Vienna, I think you've got a problem. But you know what to do about it, huh? And things can change. I don't know too much about this company, but I understand that in 2017 it was this group rather than the old company that sponsored the Biennale. But I encourage you to do something about your art world in this city. Thanks very much.
Yeah, Glenn, thanks a lot for this great presentation. Yeah, it's so inspiring, and you also pointed towards the attempt to kind of bring similar strategies also to other countries, and maybe in the future even to Vienna. I would be interested, now that the Tate galleries are liberated from BP sponsorship, do you continue working with this, or kind of end working directly with the Tate galleries? Because I guess an institutional liberation requires a bit more than just getting rid of a dirty sponsor, but it would probably also include, I don't know, more participation, a more democratic environment and things like that.
Well, we persisted, and I never thought when I went to that workshop that I'd be 6-7 years later still involved. But it was our laboratory to look at the language of activism and also how art and activism combine. And we're still interested in that. And you spoke to the idea of, we were very much happy to be a part of institutional critique. But we felt that institutional critique in its different waves formally had not gone far enough. And you spoke about this phrase, institutional liberation. Now, we can begin to think about what it may be to allow our art spaces to truly become liberated from those things that compromise these things that we value. And we're thinking about what that might be. We have some unfinished business at Tate. It hasn't changed its ethical policy. There is a door that may be open that we want shut. Maria Bolsham becomes the Tate director tomorrow, and I will send a letter from here to her asking her to change the ethical policy to make a proper assessment of oil companies. They did very cursory checks before. And to become fossil-free forever. You can't be sponsored by tobacco companies in Europe because it's a form of advertising. Most arms companies are not good sponsors, although Siemens and others sponsor in this city. But also, we wanted to have a little bit of time out, you know? There's plenty of things to do, and just to have the space to think about what's next. So all I can really say is watch this space, but we continue to be in dialogue, not just with other artists, but those affected communities that we'd worked with along. The families of people who were killed in Deepwater Horizons, the native peoples affected by the tar sands, the frontline communities. They're part of the relations that were absent from the gallery and that we tried to help reappear in the gallery. I didn't speak too much about that work, but that was always there.
Yeah, are there any questions for Glenn?
Your Liberate Tate movement, how strong is it connected to the platform London? How is the collaboration with this institution?
So over the years, we've worked directly with them. One of the works that we produced was an audio tour. So as you know, when you go into Tate, like a lot of galleries, you can get the official tour and off you go. And we worked with them with an audio tour of Tate Modern, Tate Britain, and the boat that goes between them. And that was where we used some of those voices in the audio tour. So as you go into Tate Britain, you can hear the drilling of oil. And then you can hear the voices of affected ability. And Platform did some of the interviews with affected people by BP's operation. And that was one of our collaborations. So we've done work together including that audio tour, which you can download online. So that's one example. And platform themselves are, part of the movement whereby there is this scheme of oil-free sponsorship and of other art institutions saying, we will never take oil sponsorship. And they are part of working with the Institute of Contemporary Arts and other institutions in London, because it's important that those institutions that won't take sponsorship, probably won't get offered it, still step forward and say, we will never take oil company.
Yeah, you name yourself a professional activist, and this makes you a little bit suspicious to me. I have worked, I'm coming from the oil industry. I have worked with NGOs, and my experience is that they are mostly very blind in their decisions. They have a common way to go, but they are not open for any arguments, and with your actions, your finger point at whatever not ideal situations, but you don't show any solutions. And this is something I miss there, because you should come up also at least with ideas for solutions. The industry, which you are blaming, has currently the solutions. Whether they are good or not is another point. Yeah. But they are the solutions. And we look just at fossil-free. What do you mean is fossil-free? You show us this wing of the windmill. What is it made of? Oil. Yeah. Oil product. Yeah. So we have it here. Of course, you can utilize oil in a much more intelligent way as it is done by burning. Yeah. But this is also partly the consumer's job to point on this, and on the other side, of course, on research and industry. But to some degree, I liked some of your actions and pictures, and I know the story about the Macondo well very well, and that BP did everything else than react, clever, intelligent, whatever you may say, is clear. But only blaming the oil industry for everything is a little bit too easy and too short-viewed.
It's a really good challenge, and one that we always try to, when we did articulate this, to say, oil extraction will be with us for a long while, and the transition that we need, that's underway, means that oil will be used. And people would say, our argument doesn't stand up because, oil was used in that. You got taxes before you spilt the oil. Yeah, sure. Guilty as charged. This wasn't just about the extraction of oil and the harm of burning the hydrocarbons that were extracted. Oil companies, as you know, are political actors, and we are also targeting these companies because, although it might be the case that they're calling for Trump to stay in the Paris Agreement, we know full well that they've been politically lobbying against solutions. So people like yourself may want us to put forward the solutions. We did call that up with the wind power piece as a kind of a formative picture, but we do appreciate that these things are very complex. And although in a short presentation it's very, the complexities aren't there. I hope that if you look at some of the work, it's a lot more, we try to reflect some of that complexity. But the bottom line is, of course, that harm is being done. We were very careful never to really attack oil workers or people who work for the oil industry. Of course, it's implicit that we don't think it's a great thing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we're all grown-ups in this world. But it's a really good challenge. Thank you.
If you're talking about sponsors to museums, can you find dirt on any of them? What about banks that sponsor major museums? And actually, who's going to pay? When the governments do not support the institutions, be it the art museums, galleries, or art institutions. Who do you go to for the money?
Well, you can, I think that's a very relativist point of view. We're just saying that there is, arms companies are a no. Tobacco companies are a no. Those are about harm to human well-being.
Well, some people could argue that banks are too.
Well, so we get to the fossil fuel companies. We think that they are the next category to exclude from our public culture.
Okay.
We would say we want a debate, as we're having now, about what other institutions. We don't hold a position, yeah? So you can argue about banks. One argument would say is that banks can be adequately regulated by governments, whereas extracting hydrocarbons and burning them and politically lobbying, you know, we can stack things up. So you can make an argument. There's a new Tate sponsor called Uniqlo, clothing brand, not well known for its labour practices. It's for everybody to make this judgment call. You know, we're just raising the debate, and we certainly feel that the arts should be adequately publicly funded. And so this is also an argument for the kind of public funds that are already there. Members pay, the public already pays. This is not a lot of money on top of the big largesse that the public already give. But let's have that debate.